Hello and welcome to Vernal Equinox, springing forth anew. Hello, my name is Al, or Dr. Alexander Cummins, if you prefer to be formal. I'm very pleased to be delivering this talk. I'm very happy to be celebrating the coming of some warmth and some new life and some new impetus to get on with some things, to think about what we can be cleaning away, to think about what we can be gathering in, and to be marking the turn of the tides. It's a delight to be doing this, and wherever you are, and indeed whatever the coming spring means to you, I hope this is helpful in thinking about ways in which we can move forward in a way that's hopefully mindful, as well as maybe even having a little fun celebrating the earth warming up a little. So I wanted to take this opportunity to talk not only about some of the history and some of the spirituality concerned with the turning of the seasons, but also, and indeed I would argue, history and spirituality manifest themselves very neatly through a look at some of the turning of the seasons in poetry, and in how we framed this in the right words in the right order. As poetry is sometimes described, if not defined. And with that in mind, having seen the beautiful boughs and their blooms here against the sky, I want to move forward. And there's a couple quotes here that I want to start with. One from Rilke, of course. We're going to start with Uncle Rainer, right? It is spring again. And again, this concept of spring again, right? You are back again. This is the nature of cycles, right? It is spring again. The earth is like a child that knows poems by heart. And this is nice, right? The idea that spring itself is a poem and is something that the earth knows, but also like a child kind of knows somehow, maybe in a way that we wouldn't expect it to. I think that's interesting. Then we get something far more practical and again, far more fun, I would argue, from Margaret Atwood. In the spring, at the end of the day, you should smell like dirt. I think that that's a great practical lesson to take. We have Henry David Thoreau saying, "Though I do not believe that a plant will spring up where no seed has been, I have great faith in a seed. Convince me that you have a seed there, and I am prepared to expect wonders." I really like that. This notion of pointless hope or fantasism, right, isn't going to help, but the notion of like where there's hope, where there's will, there's a way. Hope is important. Finally, Leo Tolstoy tells us spring is the time of plans and projects, right? So this is this take on it that I'm interested in here, is not just, oh, look at nature doing its thing, look at the lovely lambs, and we will look at some lovely lambs, I assure you. But it's also this notion of like, and what do we do with that new warmth, with that new life, with that new impetus towards life and further shooting and eventually blossoming and things like that. So what I'd like to talk about as we kind of discuss and hopefully celebrate some of these equinox blessings of this coming spring, of the vernal equinox, to talk a little bit about awakening, because that's a very useful theme. Just as winter was about things dying down and going into the dark and into the underworld and things closing down for a while, we now have the idea of coming back, of Persephone's return, right? So we're going to talk about awakening. We're going to talk about the new astrological year. Again, we have this notion of cycles changing. We're going to talk a little bit about how the astrological year kicks off with the ram. Spring comes in like a ram as much as like a lion, apparently. I'm going to talk about spring cleaning and spring cleansings, I suppose, as well. And again, while we can think about that as a very metaphorical thing, we are brushing the cobwebs from our mind. We are warming up again. We are getting ready to brush away the snow, so to speak. We're also, I hope, talking somewhat literally about actual spring cleaning, and that cleaning, as much as it's the Sisyphean task of a house, or it can feel like that sometimes, like the cleaning of a house, it never ends. These are also ways in which we can engage with our surroundings. We can build good habits. We can develop the space that allows more of the magics, more of the engagement, more of the connection to happen. And I'm going to look at three kinds of cleansings in this little talk we're doing. I'm going to talk about strewing. I'm going to talk about scrubbing, and I'm going to talk about soaking. So there's a nice sibilance going on there. I'm going to talk about some druidic engagements and kind of considerations, meditations, and mysteries of this season in the light of the earth. We're also going to talk about some Wiccan and more wider neo-pagan ideas of the turning of the Sabbats and the rites of Ostara. And then finally, we're going to talk about a couple spring folk charms that I find helpful. These are going to be a mixture of things that are very traditional and things that I have found in my own practice as a professional spiritual worker and reader to be helpful for people. So that's kind of our game plan. So I hope you're on board to kind of celebrate spring and its poetry and its magic and its mysteries and its engagement with this sense of shifting time and of us getting to step back into ourselves in some sense, and also a sense of what do we do now we've stepped into our own shoes, right? How do we walk in our own shoes, however many miles that might be. So, of course, we're going to start with William Blake and indeed this delightful lamb. I promised there'd be lambs. Sound the flute, now it's mute. Birds delight, day and night. Nightingale in the dale, lark in sky, merrily, 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 to welcome in the year. Little boy full of joy, little girl sweet and small, cock does crow, so do you. Merry voice, infant noise, merrily, merrily, to welcome in the year. Little lamb, here I am. Come and lick my white neck. Let me pull your soft wool. Let me kiss your soft face. Merrily, merrily, we welcome in the year. And I like this idea that as spring is born again and is born new, it is kind of an infant. And so we look at lambs who turn up around this time of year or are about to start turning up. And I like this idea of starting with, and obviously Blake is, has many of his own ideas. What a lovely poem about tigers. It's actually about how the material God that rules the world is evil, etc. I don't intend to explain Blake's ideas. I think he does his own job of trying to explain them himself. But I like this as a start, the simplicity of this, and the simplicity of spring or the start of spring. We've gone back to nothing and the white out of snow, the blank page again. And then we have things emerging, along with this adorable face here. So, spring awakenings. Let's start with some Charlotte Bronte, right? She comments that spring drew on, and a greenness grew over those brown beds, which, freshening daily, suggested the thought that hope traversed them at night and left each morning brighter traces of her steps. I really like this idea of spring being what happens in the dark, right? Because of the dark of winter, and spring comes forth. That hope itself, that spring is arm in arm or wing in wing, pinion in pinion, to be all Keats about it, with this notion of the returning hope. The dark and the winter can be very tough, whether or not you have full-blown seasonal affective disorder, or just if you're not too fond of going out and it's not very nice to be out in, let alone scraping snow or whatever off your car. So I like this idea that there's a hope here that's emerging. And again, rather than just kind of give you a sense of, well, this is what this means, this is this mystery, let me explain it for you all, I would rather just kind of pose a bunch of questions at this point early on and say, if spring is waking up, maybe that gives us a way of thinking about how we wake up, right? And we can not just think about spring, but think with spring, so to speak. So it's worth reflecting, when we wake up. Again, not just metaphorically, but also literally. What do you do first thing in the morning? There's something of spring here being the start of awakening, of opening the eyes as the seedlings open and things like this. So I think, again, not just trying to decode what a particular time is, but framing how we can engage with it and what meditations. A great meditation would be, what do you do first thing in the morning? Do you offer a sigh of relief that you have lasted another night, right? As is traditional in some prayers, right? Do you check your phone instantly and start, going through all the emails and the things you have to do? Do you you know, lie in bed for another 10 minutes just thinking how wonderful it is and how warm the pillow is and how you really don't want to get up. But then you do, and and then you slowly go and put the kettle on or make coffee or something, right? What is our opportunity here as we wake up, as we are fresh, as we have a spring at the beginning of every day, to reflect on how that's useful for us and what we are stepping into, and also what we still need to sort out, right? That's also a really important thing. It's very easy to frame spring as, oh, it's all awakening and everything's going to be great now, but that's also something we have to step into. We have to recognize the dance steps and be able to know how to do that cha-cha real smooth, right? So speaking of cha-cha real smooth, we also have this notion of not just waking up, but what do we do as we stretch out, as these seedlings extend their limbs to the sun? How does it feel to reach for the sun's warmth, right? How does it feel to stretch? How does it feel to feel our bodies, that they've been lying supine as we've slept, or hunched up fetal? I don't know how you prefer to, you know, go to sleep, but what are we doing as we're waking up, as we're stretching, as we're, you know, tending our aching joints that the cold has hopefully not only hopefully not seeped into, but if it has, hopefully is now kind of coming out in our bones, and the rest of us, of our insides, are warming up. So again, framing, I'm not suggesting everyone has to do formal sun salutation yoga, but what does it feel to stretch up, to stretch out, to feel oneself, to feel one's limbs, to feel limber, right? And finally, what does it mean in the case of spring, with this sense of not just awakening, not just extending, but also of warming, right? That the earth itself is warming, that these seeds are expressing the same impulse of fire itself to go up and to move, right? Mobility, a primal platonic manifest quality of fire itself. So what does it mean to light a fire, whether or not, again, that's putting your Bialetti on to make yourself some nice coffee in the morning, or putting the kettle on, or, you know, tending the wood fire in your delightful cottage, or, you know, lighting a candle, or indeed, as I would argue here, lighting a fire under our feet, as we would say back in Blighty, lighting a fire under your ass, right? Again, this idea of spring, you know, no season, no time, no spirit work, no spiritual practice will do your work for you. But, you know, if we can align ourselves with what's going on, then there is a good wave to surf. There is a good wind to catch with the kite, or with the sail of our attentions and our endeavors, and again, our mindfulness, I guess, is you know, can increasingly be felt as a bit of a dirty word with mindfulness and corporate kind of yoga retreats and things like that. But being present, being grounded, being here, being available, you know, these are good things. And sometimes it isn't something that happens naturally, but we need to go and gather firewood. We need to understand that we're giving ourselves a bit of a push to do something that, you know, we're still tired from winter and wanting to stay in bed and things. But what does it mean to choose to light a fire under our own feet, right? What does it mean to give ourselves some pep in our step, which is a huge concept of spring. I hope, at least, I pray that for you. So part of this warmth is indeed expressed in a astrological fire of sorts. So the new astrological year begins with Aries. As I say, spring comes in with a ram as much as a lion here, and this being the traditional, if we're doing that 12-letter alphabet that some astrologers enjoy, that we begin in the first house assigned to Aries often, and we're going to move around through the course of the year, as well as these being traditional way of allotting the houses of the heavens, right? The horizon line running here, and then seeing the journey of the sun through the underworld first, right? Again, so we have winter coming up first, and then coming up above the horizon, giving us a sense of the new year and maybe a new you. There's the question, right? Are you going to use this new year as an opportunity to do something new, or indeed to return to foundations and to return to the fundamentals even as well, right? And this is this nature of marking time. that it's a tide turn of sorts. And we can frame this in a couple of ways. We can say that it's a completed cycle. So we have successfully completed, the astrological year of 2021 into just, the first couple calendar months, at least, of 2022. So we can frame it as you've done it, and that's not worth discounting, right? We made it. Hopefully, we all made it, and so that's done with. But now, what next, right? And that's the exciting thing about this newness and about this warmth and about this, as we'll discuss, this cardinal fire. But this isn't just a sense of oh, we got to go all, we've been playing snakes and ladders and we accidentally landed on a snake and now we have to go back to the beginning. We're going to do all this again. No, we've learned, and we hopefully at least a little bit over the course of the last year, if only, if we've hopefully grown in some way, if only in age, right? So this concept of renewal is very interesting to me. We get an opportunity to feel new again, to look at things again, to have a bit of more of our sense of hope and optimism, I think, is a better frame here. We're not just going back to square one. We're not just forgetting everything we've learned and ourselves being the infant again. But maybe we've got some childlike innocence, Song of Innocence we kicked off with, Blake's Spring. And one of the things that I've been thinking about with spring this year particularly, and with the Vernal Equinox, is this sense of new plans, right? We have a vantage point at the top of the year, at the beginning, looking down on the year as it spreads out, imagining this time as like a topology, that it's a geography, that we're looking down on the year as we go down into it, right? That we have at this point at the top of the year, rather than seeing it as, oh, there's all this stuff that's unknown in the future. No, think about it we're at the top of the year and we're going into it. We get this vantage, and with this vantage, hopefully, with this sense of renewal, with this sense that we get to take what we've already learned and then apply it to things we don't yet know, to find out more things, that we get an opportunity to break old patterns. We get an opportunity to edit in some way. We get an opportunity to edit what we spend our time doing, what we spend our money doing, what we spend our attention doing. We get a chance to edit down. We also get a chance to edit up, and to be, to realize like, oh, I want to do more of this thing. This fulfills me. This excites me. This again lights that fire under my feet. And we also get the opportunity to edit out. And that, again, we'll get back to with spring cleaning. Sometimes to clear the way, we need to get the things out of the way that are in the way. And so I think hopefully we can frame some of these things in general in the course of the novelty of the new year, but also explicitly, I want to talk just a little bit about Aries itself. So big baby Aries. And again, I apologize to all the Aries placements. I don't mean that in any derogatory or in any sense of trying to infantilize anyone. I mean like a giant, like kaiju baby, right? Aries is powerful, has all this this newness, this impetus, this excitement, this play, and will go to bat for things, right? And so his Uncle Hank is Henry Rollins, speaking of, big fiery punk Aries energy, right? Early spring is the time for vigorous change. So not just newness, not just awakening, but change. Something has changed, and we have an opportunity to also understand that change and also to enact it and to engage with it. A preparation for the heat-driven oppression that is to come. All right. So this, as someone who grew up with not a lot of sun around, the heights of summer in certain parts of the States, at least, can be pretty oppressive at times, especially in summer. And so here we have this sense again that spring isn't just about looking back at winter and being like, we're not doing that anymore. It's also, again, this top of the year vantage of what's to come. This heat is only going to increase, right? So there are a couple points we can think about with the sense of the astrological year beginning in Aries, and beyond any complicated astrological election or studying your own transits, or even speaking about astrological talismans. I think there's some foundational meditations here we can take on. For a start, Aries is regarded as a cardinal sign. It is a starting sign. It's starting something, right? It's beginning. It's initiating, or it's prompting, or it's innovating. It's galvanizing to action, catalyzing, we might say. So what are you starting, right? Are you starting again? Are you going to begin something new? Is this going to be, Is spring going to be the time when you finally, learn to drive, or, finally clear out the attic, or, any number of things, right? And again, framing, not starting as having to begin from nothing, but what are you going to get round to as well? These are things worth asking ourselves. Aries, I think it would be fair to say, has a youthful exuberance to it, has a sense of the vim and vigor of youth. And again, I mean this in a hopefully a loving way. I dearly love the Aries placement, friends and family I have. But to ask what gets you stoked, right, for this fiery sign is for me a great little Americanism that's very useful here. What do you get stoked on, or stoked about, apparently, or stoked off? I don't know. Any number of prepositions. So what are you fueling? Right? What are the coals that you are poking with the iron to get them roused and to be burning hotter and brighter? Right? And there is a long association of courage and of willfulness and of boldness with fire as well. And again, not to bore everyone's socks off about the history of humoral theory or even pre-modern magical psychology, although these are interests and specialities of mine. There is this big association that having the courage to do something is about having a fire. And this is present in much of the language that survived the quote disenchantment in quote the West, and keeps us going in the sense of understanding there is having the gall to do things, having the choler, having the ire, having the fiery courage. And so the coming of Aries prompts us to ask, what are we afraid of? What's worrying, and when do we move towards that fear in order to conquer it? Now, when are we being daft and jumping out of an airplane without a parachute? That's not just a scary thing, that's a daft thing, right? When are we being dangerous? And that also prompts us to ask, what are we not afraid of? Both in the sense of what do we decide to conquer our fears about, or attempt to conquer our fears, to face our fears at least, and also what maybe should we be a little bit more wary of? Where are we running off half-cocked? Again, sure, spring and this vernal equinox is spring itself is absolutely a period of life and of birth, and of, again, gamboling lambs and opening daffodils and things like that. But there's also this sense of where are we needing to make those plans? Again, the equinox itself, as we've talked about before, is a halfway point, is a balancing act, we could frame it as. But it's also a sense of there's a care to balance. You don't generally fall into balance accidentally, right? There's a deliberateness to it, right? So being aware of where we are pushing ourselves too hard and becoming unbalanced, to return to that sense of the light and the dark, right? The crunchy and the smooth. Finally, grabbing the ram by its horns. What do you fight against? This is very easy for some people, especially with fiery placements often, that we are very good at framing, not just I hate that guy and I'm gonna do something about it, but what are the things that we can do to understand where an impulse to say I think that's wrong helps us create something beautiful, or something powerful, or something nurturing, or something, I don't know, something fun or daft or satirical even. There's a lot of fire and a lot of bite in satire, of course. So what do we fight against? That makes me think of is it Maria Bamford quote, where she says, if you choose to continue existing, if you can find no other reason to do so out of spite. Right? Through spite, all things are possible. No, I'm not encouraging people to be spiteful here, and I'm certainly not saying that that's a natural problem with people with Aries placements. But we can sometimes frame what we fight against as understanding the slight that is commensurate to the wrong that's been done, and how we have to match that. But we can also think about what we fight for, and there's definitely a sense of regardless of how we got to a position, if we heard someone say something daft, or like, no, that's ridiculous, I'm gonna write a whole book about how not necessarily about how they're wrong, but how this idea I have seems more accurate, right? That can be an impetus that doesn't have to be competitive or aggressive or fighty, right? it can help us do something. But in the course of working out what you're against, hopefully you work out some more about what you're for, and we can understand, I think, concepts of negative freedoms, of freedom from and freedom to, as well. And I think these are important things to consider as we're awakening and as we're thinking about balance and plans, but also as the world is opening up again, hopefully. So I wanted to read this Billy Collins poem today, because I think it expresses something great of this kind of Aries impulse to break open winter, to smash it in its face, so that we can have a lovely time of the spring gets out of the way. If ever there were a spring day so perfect, so uplifted by a warm, intermittent breeze, that it made you want to throw open all the windows in the house and unlatch the door to the canary's cage, indeed, rip the little door from its jamb. A day when the cool brick paths and the garden bursting with peonies seemed to so etched in sunlight that you felt like taking a hammer to the glass paperweight on the living room end table, releasing the inhabitants from their snow-covered cottage so that they could walk out, holding hands and squinting into this larger dome of blue and white. Well, today is just that kind of day. I enjoyed Billy Collins very much, and I hope you enjoyed that piece too. The sense that, spring smashes its way into the world in a sense, and or at least allows us to smash the things that are holding us back from getting out, and again, literally getting out into that dome of blue and white, and not having to cuddle next to the radiator through winter anymore, getting to see the world. So I said spring cleaning, hopefully this is, again, not just a metaphor. So I considered quoting Marie Kondo, but I settled for William Morris and this beautiful expression of one of the central tenets of the kind of ethos of his and others of the movements, the arts and crafts movement, right? This sense of artisanship is, I think, at work here, not just in like artisanal IPAs from Brooklyn and things like that, but the idea of craftsmanship, right? And Morris said, have nothing in your house that you do not know to be useful or believe to be beautiful. And while I'm not saying you have to, again, I'm not saying you have to go through your house and throw out everything and live, Oscar the Grouch style. I like this rubric, this idea of like, it should be useful or beautiful, and ideally both, right? That would be the ideal. And again, we work towards things, but we also have to work from where we are, not from where we'd like to be. So spring cleaning here gives us an opportunity to battle against all the things that have piled up, but also to think about a couple different things. And I just have some suggestions that I've noted are helpful amongst friends, family, teachers, mentors, elders, acquaintances, students, noticing the kinds of things they get up to. So spring cleaning, just generally people advise that you should do it room by room rather than trying to do the whole house at once, little bits, right? You start with a room, you do the next, and then you do the next, and then you do the next. Again, having a particular space to clear, to move things around and get under the furniture and stuff and then put back if you're going to go that far with it. Again, feels like a way of bite-sizing things out. Spring cleaning is also a thing that it seems many people recommend to engage the whole household in. Certainly it can feel less like you are making a nice space for yourself than you are, indentured to other people who might use the space as well if they're not helping you clean. So angrily hoovering while someone's watches TV is not a great ambience in general, and also doesn't necessarily clean to bring in an increased serenity or peace or tranquility that can underlie good judgment and good planning that, again, spring is kind of encouraging us to do. Finally, again, thinking about time and stuff, we have this idea that these things should be seasonal in some way, that we're thinking about as things progress. So this is most obvious in kind of getting ready to, if not actually planting seeds, getting ready to plant them, getting rid of the things that have died in the frost and stuff like that. Of scraping off the stuff on the grill and things like that you're going to use the next couple months. So the sense of not just seasonal of what needs doing, as in what you're going to use now, but what to do now so that you have it for the future, again, for this coming summer. There's also a sense that's often, if not explicitly recommended, then seems to be a product of this kind of healthy or beneficial kind of spring cleaning practices, that we establish new habits in the course of it. Again, feeling new, feeling renewed is not square one necessarily, hopefully, but rather an opportunity to do more with what we now know we have, right? With the skills, with the perspectives, with the considerations that we've gained and that have been ingrained, hopefully, that we've ingrained into ourselves. So we can establish new habits in this. And that's its own kind of spring cleaning, where we're not just scrubbing floors, though we will talk about that. We're not just throwing things out. You know, maybe do throw out that haunted amulet. Maybe that's not so useful for you anymore. But also that we are not just getting rid, but we're also bringing in, establishing new habits, better habits, hopefully. So let's talk about some specific kinds of spring cleaning, starting with strewing. So strewing, or using strewing herbs, as it's sometimes put, is essentially about scattering aromatic herbs and blossoms and things like that, but botanicals, if you want to frame it like that, on the floor. And that's about it. That's what it is. Why are we doing this? A couple of reasons. Most notably, they're aromatic, and so when we step on them, there's a scent that's released. This is a way of ensuring that a place smells nice. Well, that's nice. These have some spiritual function very often as well. Most strewing herbs don't just smell good, especially when stepped on. They also have some quality of protection or of soaking bad airs or ill humors in the air, or these miasmas, if you're going to use that wonderful Greek word, which is fun to say, at least. Finally, a lot of these have, again, as I say, protective functions. And so there's a sense that these are protecting the home. Now, how do you use strewing? Well, I've employed it for leaving them out for a very long time, for like a week or something, while I've stepped over them. I have to say that gets incredibly messy, which then requires you to do a bunch of spring cleaning. So maybe this is the step before that, right? The other ways I've done it have involved strewing them in a particular planetary hour, for instance, or a particular timing, like at sunset or dawn or something like that, or in the very middle of the day, or another time that's meaningful and suitable for this kind of thing. And then leaving them for maybe a little bit, maybe an hour, maybe the course of having spoken a prayer, a long prayer, or a prayer a number of, 4 times or 7 times or something, doing it as a durational thing, and then sweeping those strewing herbs up, considering them to have soaked things in and now be ushering out. And so you are both adding and then taking away, right? Again, this balancing that the vernal equinox is asking to take and to give with the various hands. So what are some specific strewing herbs that you might use? Well, I'm a massive fan of all 3 of these, especially rosemary with its pines, with its dried leaf pine bits. I don't think they technically are leaves. I think there's a special word for them. I should probably know. I don't generally set homeworks in these things. Maybe you look that up for yourself, and maybe you remember it because you looked it up yourself. I really like marjoram, mint, and rosemary. Now these have all sorts of uses. I work these as purifiers. Especially rosemary, which is also referred to as elf leaf, has particular connections to protecting from, if not just evil spirits, then kind of mischievous spirits, has some defense against the fae. There's Marge. Well, I mean, these all have many uses, and so I don't want to claim to be fully explaining all of them to you, but marjoram is often used to assuage grief, so it can be a particularly good herb to strew if there's been a bereavement or a loss of some kind, or a disappointment of some kind. And then mint, as well as being one of the most aromatic just in general, is a chthonic naiad, of course, Menthe, who may or may not have had an affair with Hades, and then a jealous Persephone turns her into not just this mint plant, but this mint plant that she then stomps underfoot, right, to release its odors. Mint it brings in prosperity in many traditions, because if you've ever grown mint, once it starts, it's very difficult to get it out. right? It expands and it's strong, and you know, will push other things out as well. So there's a protective element to it, a prosperous element to it. You know, if we think about the places where money is made, those are called mints, right? They mint coins, and that's present in an awful lot of languages, not just English, as a happy side effect pun. So you could employ one, two, or all of these, or indeed, you know, your own favorite herbs, especially, I would argue, aromatic ones that smell good. And I recommend you kind of try this practice out. You can strew from the corners to the door. You could go in spirals if you wanted. You could go through the house. You could do that floor and then the second floor the next day. You could pick particular days and times to do it. Again, this is a practice that's so old and kind of, I won't say established, it's also established, but has so many regional variations, has so many different ways of doing it, have so many like kind of protocols of folk magic, if you like, that really I think you can play with it and see how it works for you and see what makes sense. So I encourage you to strew. Secondly, actual scrubbing. I said we talk about that too. So you may be familiar with the concept of spiritual floor washes. This is a term. The term itself is almost is definitely influenced by the increasing popularity of hoodoo and African American conjure as a term. But you'll find many cultures and people and places and practitioners making special waters, if we want to frame it in that kind of such a like, you know, childish way, making very special waters to then wash their houses with. Again, to wash their floors, to wash their walls, etc., to wash their clothes even. You can add some of that in there, depending on what it is. And so again, I want to frame that this isn't just, you know, cleansing isn't just a metaphor necessarily. It might also involve physically cleaning the house, and that may seem to some to be a little psychologizing. No, cleansing is about removing things from your aura. And if you reduce it to just like domestic chores, that takes away the magic. I think that belies the fact that I think that tries to separate mundane from, again, from spirituality as something that occurs in dreams and in fantasies and so on, as opposed to what happens in our actual lives, and then the things we actually like need to do to live good lives, right? If our spirituality isn't serving us where we actually live, then maybe we need to adapt and need to rethink how we're approaching this and what we're expecting of ourselves and from each other. So if we're planning on making some of these kinds of floor washes, some of these kind of scrubbing baths for the home and for the house, and for, you know, not necessarily your home, even maybe you do a scrub for your place of business or your offices or your shop or whatever. So there are many ways of doing this. Yeah, there are many ways of doing this, and we're going to talk about a couple of them. So firstly, you might want to pour hot water over dried or fresh herbs. This is referred to as infusion generally. Then we might want to engage in what gets called decoctions sometimes. There are other words for it as well, which is essentially boiling up roots, which is not just pouring boiling water over them, but boiling them up for a while, boiling them down, right, reducing them, getting at those roots and their woody fibrousness, trying to get the virtues and the things out of them. Then we might want to make you know, our sacral waters with fresh plants. We're going to tear them and juice them and squash them and macerate them and stuff in fresh in lukewarm water, for instance. That's not uncommon. The other thing about making more widely spiritual floor washes or spiritual cleansing waters is we might want to add things into them, because this, after all, is, you know, a spiritual endeavor, that maybe don't leave any physical residues bar kind of like trace content stuff. So I'm talking about, sure, when you're making a floor wash to bring peaceful home after, you know, some strong arguments or something, then, you know, you're going to want to use herbs of peace. Maybe you're going to want to employ some like olive leaves to get something of that olive branch of peace, maybe some chamomile to calm people down, maybe something a little sweet to like marjoram to help people forget their grief and also to feel sweeter to each other. But you might also include, say, I don't know, like a favorite stone that also brings peaceful energy to you, or reminds you, or is a hard-won souvenir of a hagstone that you found on a beach somewhere that you use to empower your bath, or perhaps you add in, I would say coin shells, etc., things that go in them for a bit to empower them that you then take out again. Crystals, especially as well, rather than feeling like you have to throw all these things over your head when you take the bath, or when you soak, or when you soak in it, or we'll get to baths in a minute, or when you're like, got it in a bucket to mop in. You can add other things in. You could even make muslin bags with certain things so that they're in the water, but they're not in the water, if that makes sense. To think about water is worthwhile because there have been for a very long time a set of rough principles about the kinds of water you might use. So typically it's said that spring water, because it emerges kind of from the underworld in a way, right, from below us, is said to be helpful for cultivating and enjoying the blessings of the dead. Rainwater is used for the blessings of celestial gods. That makes sense to me, at least, right? River water, a little different, often for the blessing of chthonic gods, for like underworld deities. So that's not just, a bad or dark or deathly spirits in the underworld, right? It can also be very earthy spirits, right? Chthonic doesn't have to mean devilish. Finally, ocean water for the blessing of the worldly gods, we could say. I think that's it. I hope that doesn't sound too vague there. But the gods who aren't terribly celestial or terribly like chthonic, who are neither or both, or somewhere in between, literally in between, you might say. Now, you may want to combine those. You may want to say, like, well, I want blessings from the dead and from, the heavens, in which case, fill your boots, fill your rain boots. But you might also want to include other bits and pieces like we talked about, other ways of making them as well. So being aware that there are different options available and different methodologies that are going to fulfill different needs and require different efforts. So when you're making a spiritual floor wash, it's important to think about brewing times. When do you start it? When is it kind of soaking up all that stuff? For how long? And often I find this useful to frame in terms of planetary days and planetary hours. Those are things you can absolutely look up. There are apps available for them that can help time your ritual and indeed mundane ritual work. I don't like this separation between the two, really. I think cleaning your house can be a profound opportunity to engage in the spirits of water, spirits of healing, spirits of blessing. The example just used was peaceful home, spirits of tranquility, yes, but also of making peace, of seeking reconciliation in some way, of seeking to understand someone, to communicate more clearly, all these things, right? And the other thing that I feel I should pass on is that a spiritual floor wash is generally conceived of as something that one does from the corners of the home towards the front door, because again, you're sweeping that bad stuff right out. You don't want to start from there and then find bits of bad stuff all over the place. You want to go from the corners out. So that just makes sense at a practical level as well. So I briefly mentioned spiritual baths, which again, very much popularized as a term through African-American hoodoo and conjure. And having been lucky enough to train with some conjure doctors and so on, I feel confident in again saying that while there may be specific techniques to those practices, that really you should learn from someone that does that and that has that context and that experience. Again, lots of people have been pouring water over ourselves and each other for a very long time for a whole variety of reasons. So you get two main kinds of baths here, and this is where soaking was a bit more of it fit the S sibilant stuff rather than just being that, because there are two main kinds of baths, which are pour-on baths or pouring baths, which are usually in a basin or a bucket or something, and as the name suggests, pour it over yourself. The other kind of bath is indeed, as the title suggests, a soaking bath, a bath that you get inside and kind of go about, or say a bunch of prayers about, look very, very serious, depending on the kind of bath you're doing. Pouring baths offer taking things off. That's the way it's framed. That as you pour it, especially down your back, you can envisage things washing off you, right? Not just curses, not just the deadly blood curse of the sorcerer witch that you've angered or upset, but of general spiritual detritus, in the same way that we have to wash periodically. I'm told, I jest, because there's just an accruing of things around us, right? Especially if we're moving through dusty spaces or something like that. And so this is a sense of dusting off, of tuning ourselves up, of polishing things out a little bit as well. And one of the other features of pour-on baths frequently is that some of them, and in some traditions especially, are made, if not lukewarm, then cold, which is not necessarily pleasant to pour over yourself. There's definitely a sense of, oh, I can feel my soul leaving my body. But that itself has been shown relatively recently to be something that's incredibly good for certain people, at least in helping their immune system. There's been evidence to suggest that it's good for people with certain kinds of anxiety, certain kinds of depression. It can help with. It kind of offers a reset, right, of an ice plunge, and many people swear by it. A soaking bath, on the other hand, is generally not such an unpleasant one necessarily, and not all pour-on baths have to be unpleasant either. And again, a moment of, and then feeling new and invigorated is not necessarily unpleasant itself, just not necessarily comfortable. Soaking baths tend to be a little more comfortable. They can be used for soaking things off you. They really can, in the same way that a pour-on bath is meant to cleanse stuff off you. But primarily, I would argue they're for soaking in. And that's where you need to start thinking about, well, what ingredients am I putting in here? What are the things not are the ingredients I'm using to cleanse, like hyssop or things like that, depending on your tradition. But what am I putting in to empower me, that I can soak in, that can strengthen me, that can add to what I'm up to, that can help fuel me in some way? Again, thinking about fueling ourselves is, I think, really useful here. And again, you could, there's an awful lot of snide comments and silliness around, especially around, a culture and social media around what self-care is and isn't, whether or not doing a bath is magical or not. And it's really going to depend on how you're doing it and what you're getting out of it, how you're engaging with it. But to be clear, this sense of fueling ourselves, the other way of looking at that is that self-care is very real and very important. It allows us to care better, not only for ourselves, but for the world and for each other. Right. And really we are into that realm of like having to sort of fix one's own oxygen mask before you can fix other people's. Now that can be taken to an extreme. Oh, I can't possibly help you until I have 8 mansions, right? But there's also a sense here of don't exhaust yourself without replenishing yourself. So speaking of exhausting and replenishing, again, it's very easy for us to get overly pastoral way too quickly with spring. But the thing about spring is that it also has this kind of scraggly phase, for want of a better term. Looking at like fledgling birds, most fledgling birds, beyond maybe goslings and maybe chicks, which are fuzzy and adorable from the get-go. A lot of birds, the fledglings, the ones just as their wings are coming in, look kind of half cooked, sometimes. No, not to body shame any gawky, awkward teenage birds or anything. We've all been there. But it's worth bearing in mind that spring isn't just this like, oh my God, verdant, magnificent thing. It's also a thing that takes kind of work and effort and has a certain brownness to it for a while. In short, the snow's melted, that's great. Not everything has come through yet. And I think we get this in William Carlos Williams' Spring and All, which let's read that now. By the road to the contagious hospital, under the surge of the blue mottled clouds driven from the northeast a cold wind. Beyond, the waste of broad muddy fields, brown with dried weeds, standing and fallen. Patches of standing water, the scattering of tall trees. All along the road, the reddish, purplish, forked, upstanding, twiggy stuff of bushes and small trees with dead brown leaves under them, leafless vines, lifeless in appearance, sluggish, dazed spring approaches. They enter the new world naked, cold, uncertain of all, save that they enter, all about them, the cold, familiar wind. Now the grass, Tomorrow, the stiff curl of wild carrot leaf, one by one, objects are defined. It quickens, clarity, outline of leaf. But now, the stark dignity of entrance. Still, the profound change has come upon them. Rooted, they grip down and begin to awaken. So again, we see our familiar themes slightly differently articulated. Here, more of an emphasis on not the seed cracking the earth as the start, but what comes just kind of before that and requires it. You know, a lot of spring can feel like waiting for spring sometimes. So let's examine some of the ways in which the vernal equinox is celebrated as a festival by those of various Druid traditions. And again, I'm drawing on the order of bards, urbates, and druids. They're not the only Druid organization at all, but they frame some things that are helpful, I think, for us to talk about. Alban Ilia, if I'm mispronouncing that, I did apologize. I've heard many ways of saying it. The point of balance between Imbolc and Beltane, right? Between Imbolc has many translations as does Beltane, but you know, from Candlemas, we might say, if we're using an old Catholic calendar, to the May, right? At the point of balance too between day and night, and it is a perfect time to open to the quality of balance in our own lives. So again, this emphasis on balance here with the equinoxes, not the standing still of the sun at solstices, which again can be a sense of reaching its height or its depths, right? We've plumbed them and now it's working out what it's doing, but rather we are realizing we're at a halfway point, and this is a point of balance and of equilibrium and of the opportunity to have a little foot in the light and a little foot in the dark, as this kind of image sort of suggests in some way. So it's also said spring with the Druid movement is at least a triple celebration. One could indeed take it back even to winter solstice with the rebirth of the light. But however, beginning with Imbolc or Brigid, right, again, Candlemas, as the first of a trio, we have the first plough, the washing of the face of the earth, and 8 lights, because it is a distinctly mother goddess occasion. So we have the use of earth, water, and light. And again, if they're candles, then that light is also fire, of course. And there's a bunch of things here, but one of the things that I like about this is that it folds. It doesn't just give us a bunch of individual things to do. It understands there's an impetus from Imbolc through Alban Ilia through to Beltane, right? Likewise, you know, as the second point says, we could start even further back with winter solstice itself. And so I think this is worth us thinking about the sense of what's the balance here for a start. What's the sense of what we're moving out of and moving into? How are we celebrating the earth itself as it does this, leading the way for us to be able to do it? How do we understand, you know, these elemental engagements? We can get a little deeper with this, and there's a lovely write-up. This is not the full ritual at all. I recommend, if you're interested in this, you go and check out Maria Ida Weaving's Alban Ilia solo ritual from the Obord website. But this is just a kind of introduction to it. And again, it gives us an articulation of a lot of the themes that we can understand are going on in this season, in these particular ways of celebrating. Ida Weaving says, I draw a circle in my sacred space to celebrate the festival of the spring equinox. Life is quickening everywhere, right? When we say the quick and the dead, we're not just talking about, oh, who was too slow to not get shot, right? We're in Westerns, quick, the quick of your nail is the alive part, right? Life is quickening everywhere. Catkins and pussy willow herald the greening of the trees. The nodding trumpets of daffodils, golden and sweet smelling, are the fanfare of the dawning year. Their brightness kickstarts my sleepy senses, filling me with anticipation. The boundless energy and desire of the goddess's hair ignites my spirit and fuels my bodies with a newfound enthusiasm. All nature is stretching awake, and I, like a brave green shoot, surface from my winter stillness, driven on by the growing light and warmth of the radiant goddess of spring. There is a greening in the world, a greening of my soul. All life must rise up from the dark soil, must break out of the safety of the womb and the egg to follow the irresistible call of growth. And I think this is, as I say, this is just the start of the ritual. I recommend you check it out if this writing and this kind of framing appeals, as I hope it does. You know, these are absolutely themes that we've already talked about, and we're going to continue to talk about in the course of coming to some conclusions and some meditations and things like that. Again, some of the motifs we'll see here: eggs, hares, start to, when we realize that the spring equinox is also paving the way for the celebrations of the Eastertide and their attendant or underlying, pre-Christian roots. We start to see some interesting stuff going on. So again, to speak of Easter means to speak of Ostara. And here we have the Wiccan spring equinox and various other neo-pagan spring equinoxes as well. So again, there's a general thematic emphasis on balance. Again, it's the equinox, right? It's the period where the day is exactly equal to the night, right? There is a period of, there's an emphasis on renewal, right? Again, this thing of coming back again, of the earth renewing, of our commitments being renewed to the earth, we might even say. There's emphasis on action, on doing stuff about this. Again, lighting that fire. If the fire isn't lit within us, then we go and get kindling and firewood and do it ourselves. Again, this action isn't just action for the sake of it. It's beginning things, and it is doing it again in this kind of optimism, this hope for movement forward, for new possibilities. So there are many things that folks will do to celebrate Ostara. Here are 4 of them. The most typical seems to be, although it's not the only one or the most standard, but the one that at least we have, a lot of nice pictures for, is setting up an Ostara altar. And again, this idea of seasonal decoration, not just being for a day, but for a tide, right? But ideally, it's there for the actual equinox day itself. Again, framing how much these are individual days versus periods of time, how durational are these things. So, and set up an Ostara altar. Then there are a bunch of spring banishings that are frequently done. Again, cleansings, right? Then we have rites of rebirthing that are sometimes done in this kind of season as well. And finally, and some of my favorite, the grounding earth meditations. Yes, the earth is warming up, but what does that mean? How does that feel? How can we engage with that? What are the stories that can help us enter that state of sympathy and of understanding? I mean, not just sympathy, but cosmic sympathia, right? That like moves to like, that magic is the agreement and disagreement of nature with itself, as Heinrich Cornelius Agrippa says. So the motifs of Ostara are things like, as we've seen, eggs. It's not dissimilar from some of the druidic material. Eggs, snakes, daffodils, snowdrops, even the first flower of spring in many parts of the world, rabbits and hares, gardening, and of course the care of children and playing with children, or the play of children. Also very significant in this time period. Again, new life, right? So Wiccan celebration will include homage and devotion to Ostara, who is depicted here, and who's depicted here in kind of lovely form. Did it again there. We also find worship of Cybele, however you want to say that, of Freya as well, and indeed more broadly of Osiris as a dying and reborn god of agriculture, of Sarasvati, who has a puja in spring, and of Asasya, Shanti, fertility deity, if you want to put it like that, that you can find in Ghana. And there are various other deities worshipped as part of Ostara, who are generally considered deities of the spring, who are honored in spring, or are celebrated for bringing a fertility to and from and of the earth. So I teased these earlier. So Ostara shrines, again, things we can take particular pictures of, are very easy. This is a common kind of setup where we see like a little nest here. And again, drawing on some of the traditions around Easter is helpful. This is the season. There are egg painting kits more available than other times of the year. So drawing on some of these things, including some of our motifs, the hair and these eggs as well, and this greenery that's coming through, this new life. So this is not an uncommon setup. We also can see things like this, where it's still clearly an altar, but it's a little less arranged as a thing. It's a little different arrangement, I might say. Here we have not 8, but 6 lights. But again, notice that there are 3 in white and 3 in black. So we have balance going on again between the light and the dark. We have a little drink offering. We have some stalks of plants that I would definitely be thinking about using for dipping into waters and asperging with. And we have, these stones, a couple of bits and pieces, things like this. I don't want to analyze any of these too heavily and be like, this is the perfect thing or this is terrible, but showing that there are different options. Finally, there's this this arrangement here where, again, I love stacking bowls and putting things in between them. That works for me. I like to build up. I would rather start with something small and build it up than build something massive straight away. So I like this idea of starting small with a bowl and then adding another bowl underneath, perhaps some material separating it, and gradually working it up and out, right? This unfolding prosperity, for instance. And indeed, there are many other ways that you might decide to celebrate Ostara. There might be particular color schemes that you employ, particular scarves that you hang, particular real or synthetic flowers that you bring in at various times. Again, working out what works for you, working out how long this shrine is up for, whether or not it exists, and therefore can start to teach us about other kinds of renewal or beginning at other times of the year as well. It's less, it's a little more frowned on, but it isn't not done. So let's think about spring in terms of what isn't, right? In terms of what we're absent from, what we're detached from, whether that was winter or moving forward. From you have I been absent in the spring, when proud-pied April, dressed in all his trim, hath put a spirit of youth in everything. What a wonderful line, right? A spirit of youth in everything. That heavy Saturn laughed and leaped with him. Saturn, the heavy, moribund ruler of time and mortality and severity and seriousness. Here, spring is so wonderful that even heavy Saturn laughs and leaps. Nor the lays of birds, nor the sweet smell of different flowers in odor and in hue could make me any summer's story tell, or from their proud lap pluck them where they grew. Nor did I wonder at the lily's white, nor praise the deep vermilion of the rose. They were but sweet, but figures of delight, drawn after you. You pattern all of those. Yet seemed it winter still, and you away, as with your shadow, I with these did play. So this idea of like, it can all be great, but if there's something you're missing in here, if it's still winter in your heart, then all of this fine greenery and things is so much frippery, is so many toys to occupy our attention while we pretend we don't miss someone or something. And that's a real part where spring isn't just, oh, now everyone is naturally revitalized and full of beans and so happy. It's also a period where we adjust to expectation and the way our insides feel versus how the outside world feels. Well, not versus, but in concordance with. So let's talk a little bit about some personal charms of spring. And again, these personal for you and personal from me. So some of these are established things. Some of them are, a lot of the things are kind of idiosyncratic in terms of my own practice that I started doing and I found useful for me. And then as I would see more students and coach more magicians and witches and sorcerers and do readings for people and do consult and discover what's useful for them. These have been some of the things that I have found useful in this season in the past, and will certainly be doing ahead. Firstly, investing in our tools of cleansing. Now, yes, that's scrubbing brushes and like say, marigold rubber gloves and hopefully, non-toxic and biologically safe cleaning supplies themselves. But I'm also talking about ritual tools of cleansing. I'm talking about brooms and brushes especially. And I am a particular fan of this kind of style that gets called turkey wing. I first encountered it when I was helping out at the Cauldron Black in Salem, Massachusetts, who sell a variety of these in all sorts of amazing colors. And I just fell in love with the design of them, how they feel. They're about, they can be about a foot and a half. So they're more manageable than a whole ass broom. And they're great for a number of reasons. You can hold them. They have one way of, owing to how they are woven, they can offer a big stiffness if you need to beat like a carpet or something. They also offer a slightly softer side the other way, so you can do some careful scooping. And again, you can move your strewing herbs across your room and so on, this kind of thing. So I would advise you to if you are interested in doing more magical ends of spring cleaning, then you may want to think about using a broom or indeed a brush if you have one, maybe acquiring one. Again, if you don't have one, I'm not saying you have to buy one, obviously, who the hell am I? But I found it useful. And one of the other things I found useful is to empower my tools of cleansing. We think about using cleansing tools to make other things clean and powerful and consecrated, but we can also consecrate those tools themselves. We can anoint it lightly, like one of these turkey wing brushes with sacred oils, for instance, depending on what kind of cleansing we're doing with it, right? Or you even make some kind of infusion, maybe if we could lightly, we don't want to overly wash it too much because it'll disturb the bristles and things, but we can lightly add a little bit to it. We can fumigate it. That's another classic, burning incense, giving it a bath in the smoke of frankincense or cedar or copal or any number of other cleansing aromatic incenses. Finally, and again, this may be where you want to get a bit extra, where you want to decorate it for its personal kind of appeal for you. You may want to attach ribbons, maybe, up to you, just an idea. Or even like, again, talk about hagstones, a stone with a hole in it, an adder's stone. You may want to talk about, attaching that somehow. When we think about beading parts of it, like the handle, or maybe just having like, a bead that's attached to it in some way. Ways in which we can, this is adornment, this is decoration, but it's also enrichment. It's also engaging with the tool more. It's also giving it more things that it may give you things. You can even start making tiny little charm bundles and so on, and putting those on it or in it or next to it or stored with it, for instance, or lashed to it. So let's think in terms of these charms about what does it mean to harness. So that's our cleansing stuff. Cool. What about harnessing this fertile, warming earth? What can we be doing? What charms can we be bringing? Well, the first is gardening. Again, like every season offers us the opportunity to understand its effect on nature. But there's something about spring that's especially around, like, maybe grow some stuff. See how it goes. So plants, both outdoor. If you have all the acres ever on your magnificent farm, wonderful. I'm very jealous. Great. But maybe it's a plant pot on a windowsill, and maybe that's something that you tend and understand and see the effects of the turning of the seasons in. Right, it becomes a weather vane of sorts. It becomes an indicator as well as itself, a thing to grow and to nurture and even develop a relationship of some kind with. Might we want to try and work with this warming earth of spring through crystals? Maybe, sure. They are they are shiny earth stuff, right? So it might well make sense. Many people work with crystals, myself included, for their occult virtues or for their vibrational qualities in kind of more New Age terms. The only thing I would suggest about using crystals for spring rites of cleansings, and I guess cleansings in general, is to consider that most crystals are not terribly ethically sourced, and not just because people don't bother. Some stones and minerals are incredibly difficult to ethically source, if possible at all. So maybe that affects the notion of like, is this thing really cleansed? Is this thing good at cleansing? If it was, if child labor was involved in its in its mining and distribution manufacture. So maybe crystals is one to give pause for. Again, I'm not trying to morally high horse here, perhaps there is no ethical consumption to capitalism, but it seems there's unethical consumption and then even more unethical. So some unethical consumption is more unethical than others, right? We might say. The thing I have found helpful in terms of thinking about this engagement with a warming earth, actually, funnily enough, is literal handfuls of garden dirt. Not maybe plural handfuls, but maybe one. I mean, I've got small hands, so maybe for you it's half a handful. A dish full of dirt, honestly, a dish full of dirt. You'd be surprised. And this, for me, is interesting because it's a dish full of dirt crops up in a lot of funerary rites as well, which when we talk to archaeologists of at least the British Isles, it seems that, sure, the period that's now called All Souls and so on is indeed a period of engagement with the dead, but so is spring, and they're different kinds of engagements, but they are engagements. And when we're doing that, we need to be aware of how these dirts are being affected by the world as well. We are bringing in some of the garden into our home. We are doing things that are capable of making them work for us. So I think one of the things that I appreciate about working with dirt itself is that it is, a friend of mine once wrote a poem about dirt called Muck, where he called it the brownest rainbow. It's got all these different things in it. We hold it and it has millions upon billions of different good and bad bacteria and bits of life and remnants of other life, and that dirt itself is made of all these different things of erosion and so on, that there's a whole microcosm in a handful of dirt. And bringing that in from the garden into the home can also remind us of the garden and can form these links between them. And dirt can also form the basis that we can then put other things on, that we can plant on it, can place other sacred objects on that, burn candles on it, or put glasses of water on, and so forth. There are ways in which we can engage with the pentacle of dirt, if we want to frame it in that kind of ritual magic kind of way. So I would suggest, crystals are great and can do wonderful, wonderful things, and can deploy and cohere powerful occult virtues, but so can dirt. So maybe get a little dirt under the fingernails, right? Finally, for rites of spring, to bring in some of that Aries kind of element, I think we can go a couple different angles here. Aries is very good for being protective, and that kind of energy of cardinal fire coming forward has a spiky element to it. It can be a little fighty. It can be a bit boyish, but it's essentially this kind of virtues of Mars, these capacities of martial virtues and spirits to protect us, and we can use a number of martial ingredients. As Aries ruled by Mars and exalted by the sun, can come forward here at this time to do some stuff for us as well. So great martial ingredient for this, for kind of turning this boyish enthusiasm into action and stamina and strength. Oat straw, which is often something that's said to be a kind of tonic for making us be more active, and sometimes especially kind of framed as like a thing that's good for either for men or for people engaging in like more masculine energies, if you want to frame it like that. Then there's another classic from African American hoodoo and conjure of using red brick dust in things. I find this a very, very martial thing as well. This is again kind of personal practice of having trained with different people, and so one of the classic ways of working with red brick dust is to crush it up and to line things with it. If you've seen the skeleton key, you'll be familiar with this concept. But this can be used to line around your property, around your house, or around a door, whatever, for a little bit of extra protection. We may even want to get a bit more, not just spiky, but a little poisonous, and employ some nettles, which are, stinging nettles, urtica, which again we can boil into a lovely soup, and make and eat without getting the spikes on our tongues. Hopefully we don't sting ourselves while eating it. That's never happened to me eating nettle soup. Nettle soup is also, nettles are very high in iron, which again is the metal of Mars, and helps us avoid becoming anemic, right? So again, the red blood flowing well. Finally, and this is deeply like personal, not deeply personal as in like it's a secret thing I never tell anyone, but it's deeply idiosyncratic. I've never encountered anyone else using this, but they get called a variety of things: bang snaps or snap bangs, the little things that go that have got, that are usually like sawdust and a little bit of like tiny silver nitrate sometimes in there, I think. Little bangers, right? And I like this in the same way that to throw a couple of those around the place at the vernal equinox is a way of, again, either at the vernal equinox itself or at the tide of the turn of Aries. Again, in the sense of like a new astrological new year, that's pleonasm slightly. The astrological new year, kind of drawing on some of the inspiration of fireworks used in Chinese New Year and in other kinds of celebrations, of making the rough music and the loud sounds, the pots and the pans and the shouting and the whooping and the wailing, and the clacking of things in Jewish traditions to scare away what's bad, and to be loud and to be in charge, and to say, I am stepping into what I'm doing here. So these are just some kind of charming ways that you may want to engage with, tools of cleansing that you can yourself empower in various ways, working with the earth in various ways, and working with the protective elements of coming Aries. One of the other things we can do, and I really like this, is not just having like one set of dried herbs around somewhere, but having these kind of bouquets of them. These dried bouquets of these botanical ingredients. And it makes me think about anthologies. And the word anthology comes from the Greek for a garland of flowers. In fact, we use it to refer to, a book of different authors or different chapters on things. But it has this quality of bringing things together, of all the unique bits of nature kind of patchworking themselves around, right? And so we can think about this in terms of how we compound stuff. So as nature is kind of expressing these things, we see what looks and smells and feels good together. And then we can also kind of deploy those in different parts of the home, not just as like a delightful potpourri, but in bringing their virtues and their blessings and their witnesses and their reminders of these things in the world to us as well. So we can have them around in these little dishes. I made this one with my mom. We can also take these ingredients, and they're there as ingredients. They're there as an assemblage, as a delightful kind of altar or a shrine of flowers kind of thing, this anthological flower shrine. We can also use these as materia for things as well. We could also reduce these dried flowers, for instance, to a powder and add a pinch of it to baths, right? We can put these in a nice bottle and kind of salt, kind of condiment our other other baths or charms or other kind of magical working that we might be doing if we're so inclined to work with herbs in that way. And again, exploring what works for you and how that feels is, if we're not intending to do any vast, deadlined results magic, I have to, there has to be $12 million in my account by midnight, if it's more about like, let's feel how spring feels, then that's a lot more experiential and a lot more based on like what you are, how you're engaging with this stuff than what anyone might tell you about the proper way to do it. Just a little bit. There are definitely, unsafe things to do. Be very careful about what bouquets and what bundles and what botanicals you bring in if you have household pets. Cats are remarkably allergic to an awful lot of lovely plants, so be careful of that if you are. Like there are wrong ways of doing things in terms of dangerous things you might be doing, even with plants that you don't expect to be. Lilies, beautiful but deadly, right? But by the same token, unless you are specifically engaging in certain traditions or certain kinds of techniques or whatever, then, this is an opportunity for you to engage with spring and for you to give spring opportunities to show you things. So a couple spring conclusions. Renewal, as I've emphasized, hopefully, as we've returned to re-emphasize, right, as we've renewed this point about renewal, doesn't have to mean starting again. Right, we don't step in the same river twice. We have the memories and the experience and the bumped heads and the scraped knees of the whole year past to now take that experience and to become even bigger and bolder and wiser and hopefully more beautiful. Right, so it doesn't have to mean starting again. It can mean moving forward. Right. With a refreshed sense of vitality, of feeling new again. And that's, I'd say, is a big quality of a lot of like spiritual washing of floors and of houses, and also of spiritual bathing, right? That we are allowing ourselves to feel in some way, not just new in the sense of, oh, the world is, I'm going to pretend I've never seen a sunset before, although that's a fun exercise to do, I recommend. Oh my God, what is that? But there's also this quality here of feeling revitalized, right? Of feeling ready to face new things again. The astrological new year gives us all sorts of opportunities to do all sorts of things that we do at the calendar new year, right? Of all those traditions of cleansing things out, of first stepping, of doing all those things about like it's the top of the year, it's the start of something, but it doesn't have to mean a million New Year's resolutions. Just because it's good to plan at the vernal equinox at this point of balance, where we can see where things could tip either way in a good way, right? Where we can see where we wouldn't need to do very much to veer one way or the other, right? That the paths are very open to us at this point. But it doesn't have to mean that we take on a million things that we're definitely gonna, I'm definitely gonna go to the gym 18 hours a day, and I'm definitely gonna call my aunt, more regular, at least 12 times a week, and these kinds of things. These pressures we put on us are not necessarily helpful either. Especially in terms of those pressures, the fire in the earth. Yes, there's this fire. Yes, there's a sense of lighting a fire under our feet or up our asses, if that isn't too crude for you. But it doesn't have to mean breaking ourselves, right? It doesn't have to mean banging your head against something just for the sake of it, right? Again, one of those descriptions, definitions of madness is, is doing the same thing again and expecting different results, right? So the fire in the earth is great for warming. And I remember this fire at this point, maybe cardinal, but it's still like thawing stuff out. It's not the beating sun or the beautiful rainbow of Leo and Sagittarius. It's the torch that we bring. It's the start of thawing out, right? And we can't carry a whole bonfire, that will burn or break us, right? So we carry the torch forward, right? That warmth of spring itself is a wonderful thing, can help us revitalize, can help us stretch, can help us acclimatize, can help us feel new again. But it doesn't guarantee that there are no more problems, right? And again, to frame, if I just get to spring, then everything will be okay. If I just do this, if I place all my eggs in this Easter basket, then everything will be fine. That's usually a recipe for being disappointed, if not even more wiped out when you get there and don't miraculously instantly feel healed and revitalized instantly, right? Revitalization is something that we have to accept. It's something that we have to plot into our routines sometimes, It can also feel like, oh God, I have to do a bath about doing baths, right? And so how we work that into our way of understanding that, again, no spiritual practice will do your work for you. No meditation, no visualization will instantly fix everything that I've encountered yet. If you've encountered one that did that, please let me know. I'd love to try it. But again, I'm not saying that spring doesn't help, but to expect it to do everything automatically is to set ourselves up for disappointment. So the warmth of spring can thaw a bunch of difficulties, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you won't have difficulties. It just may give you more tools to be able to deal with them. Spring cleaning, as I've said, doesn't have to mean renouncing all possessions forever, right? You don't have to go, live under a waterfall necessarily. Although maybe if you get the opportunity, and you want to, why the heck not? hopefully it means that we clear the way so that we can see how best to go forward. Finally, equinox rebalancing, this point of like, oh, I can see all the options. I can see that the day is equal to the night at this point, but there's the opportunity to be informed by both, that the devil and the angel on our shoulder can kind of agree on some things here. But it doesn't have to mean indecision, right? Again, the solstices are that period of like stopping and reflecting. This is active, I think. Like it's only briefly, very briefly equal, and then we're already into the course where it's not equal anymore. It's a moment and it's gone, right? Or it's preserved in our hearts and our practices as we can, again, marking the tides is also about marking our relationality to them. So I hope that's been helpful to just have some reflection on spring and some ways in which we can engage with the vernal equinox, specifically with the coming of Aries. And I wish you all, get to gambol like lambs, maybe even with lambs, if that's an option. And I hope this has given you a sense of how to engage a lot more in that warmth and in that coming awakening. So thank you very much, everyone. If you'd like to reach out to me about this, please do. My website is imaginatively titled My Name. And if you want to drop me a line, if you want these slides, for instance, or if you'd like to talk about any of the ideas that I've discussed here, please drop me a line at consultandsorcerer@gmail.com. I thank you so much for having me, and I wish you all a beautiful and pleasant spring, and may it be one that brings you more opportunities to work out how to stand firm, how to light the useful fires under those firm standing feet, how to move forward and blossom into the world, and to produce those beautiful scents of ours, to understand our relationships with our homes, with each other, with nature, and with the sense of time as, after all, the motion of the celestial bodies. And what more celestial body could there be than Earth, our home, where we live? So thank you all, everyone. I hope that's been helpful, or at least interesting to you. And I'd like to catch you at another one of these. All right, thanks, everyone. Do take care.